I made a video a few weeks ago talking about why Gen Z is afraid of sex. I called it the sex recession, and I gave my 3 reasons to back it up. But you guys dropped thousands of comments on that video with your personal reasons for not having sex. And today, we're going to talk about those reasons from the mouths of Gen Zers themselves. There were a few common themes that I noticed, so I put them into 5 categories that we're going to break down. Starting with one that was pretty surprising to me: STDs. One of you said, "There is an STD pandemic going on right now according to the statistics. They won't say it, but the numbers are genuinely alarming. That alone is reason enough to abstain from it." Interesting. And a user named MightyTaco123 just said, "I don't want STDs." Valid. Now this is an interesting one for me because it makes me reflect on how much of a reckless young lad I was in my 20s. I'm not going to say I wasn't paranoid about catching an STD, but it definitely wasn't stopping me. Because in my mind, just trust your partner and wrap it up, right? But there were hundreds of comments talking about how Gen Z has a genuine fear of catching an STD. And according to the statistics, there is real reason to be concerned. Research says that kids aged 15 to 24 accounted for almost half of the reported STI cases in 2023. 48.2% to be exact. That is a scary number that says that you are far more likely to catch an STD while you are young, which Gen Z is. And with me being a Zillennial, which is someone born right before Gen Z, I can attest to this from my own personal experience and the experiences of my friends. A lot of my friends that I knew in college who were sexually active had caught something in the past, or at least were worried that they had caught something at some point. I've also had to get tested several times in my life, and one of my best friends in college actually ended up catching HIV. So now he'll be on medication for the rest of his life because of one mistake. And there's also a conversation to be had about the education around STDs. I think back to one day where my college roommate came back from a one-night stand, and he said, and I quote, "I need to wash the STDs off before they settle in." Yeah, yikes. I don't know what this man was being taught in school, but that is not how that works at all. And that is a night and day difference from this commenter who said, "I actually do not have any feelings of shame for being a virgin, mainly due to the fear of STDs." Unlike my college roommate, he clearly did not fear STDs because he thought he could just wash them off, which is crazy. So score 1 for Gen Z. I initially didn't think this was a big concern, but when I really thought about it, you should be cautious because an STD can be a life sentence. So definitely educate yourself and protect yourself better than my generation did. And if you're gonna do it, find a partner you trust. Which leads to our second reason to why Gen Zers say they don't have sex. They can't find someone to have sex with. So before I kick off this section, let's assume that we are talking about straight men and straight women only. Okay? Let's see what this commenter had to say. "The dating market became globalized. You aren't competing against males in your neighborhood anymore. You are competing against Saudi princes, Nepo babies, and Chad-adjacent men thousands of miles away." The Saudi prince thing is a bit dramatic, but he's right. Another commenter said, "It's also harder to look good when you don't have enough money for gym memberships, brand new clothes, and dating apps. Online dating also messed up people's standards." If I'm being blunt, if you aren't rich, handsome, or overly charismatic, the chances of you being chosen by a woman are a lot lower. Although that doesn't mean it's impossible, I do think online dating and raised standards have made it much harder for men to date and have sex. But what's the story for women? If it's so easy for them to go out and have sex, why are they also having less sex? Well, there are a few factors that women have to worry about that men don't. Like how when engaging in sexual activity, 99% of the time, women are committing to a power dynamic that puts them at risk. And that requires a lot of trust. In this theoretical and very generalized example, the woman has to factor in her safety when picking a partner. She has to make sure she isn't going to pick someone who is going to hurt her or get obsessed with her and stalk her or shame her online. Because although we are a much more progressive society, slut shaming is still a thing, especially in the professional world. And not to mention, there is a whole movement going around of women trying to decenter men from their lives, which means the days of a woman needing a man are over. So take that and combine it with the endless options online dating gives women, and it's easier for them to be picky. Your great-grandma didn't have that kind of freedom. It was either Philip who worked at the plant or Joe who was in the army, because that's who was around. And I alluded to this before, but with all these factors considered for men and women, it ultimately comes down to trust. Like this person says, "The major thing is that trust is vital for sex. Since we live in a low-trust society, it has sharply declined and men know that the game is rigged, so most are playing another game, sometimes literally." And he said dark tide is his go-to. Which is funny because there's also research that suggests a link between gaming and a decreased sex life as well. But the point stands. Gen Z isn't finding partners because they don't trust the opposite sex. And you can see that from the comments in my last video about this topic. A lot of people were just blaming each other. Like this woman said, "Some guys in this comment section really need to consider where all this bitterness is coming from. You can't generalize an entire population of humans as delusional, hard to get, and picky and expect them not to shut you down. Actual human connection to one another is important, and that is something I did not touch on enough in my last video. This disconnect between men and women has a lot of people just not wanting to play the game anymore at all." Alright, so we covered STDs and lack of partnership. The third reason Gen Zers say they don't have sex these days is because they can't afford it. This commenter said, "I can't afford a freaking child, bro. Do you know how bad it is with costs right now? I won't subject another poor soul to this reality unless I can provide some kind of life to them." So no, my lady and I are abstinent for multiple reasons, but one is that it's way too risky for us and the potential child. I chose to highlight this comment specifically because this guy is actually in a relationship and still choosing to not have sex because, like this commenter says, an accidental child is a death sentence financially. This is something I think about a lot because me and my lady are doing okay. It's just the two of us and 2 cats, and she's a lawyer, I have my career. Money isn't tight, but we're by no means ballin'. So I compare that to someone who is in Gen Z who could barely get into the workforce right now, which means they are getting paid pennies. Rent is still high, groceries are still high, just existing is expensive, and now all of a sudden you mess around and have a kid to feed? Yeah, good luck, buddy. And an accidental kid is an extreme in this scenario. This commenter said it best. He says he can't survive in this economy, let alone date. New clothes, gas money, drinks, dinner, condoms. Your wallet does not stand a chance in this economy, especially considering a lot of us are still in debt from student loans. So yeah, you guys were spot on about this point. I saw a lot of comments about how it's just financially irresponsible to have kids right now. And it kind of ties into the next reason that you guys say you are not having sex, which is Gen Z is stuck in survival mode. Nobody has time for anything anymore. A lot of people mentioned this in the comments. This guy says he worked 99 hours last week alone, which is definitely something I can relate to. Young adults report stress, burnout, and mental health burdens more than any other generation. Because of this, a lot of people reported that they don't feel that they have the emotional bandwidth for intimacy. Because Gen Z is the generation that never experienced boredom. You have access to everything you could ever need on your phone, and when you aren't on your phone, you are likely in class, at work, or playing video games because you're burnt out from all of the above. That naturally leaves a lot less time for real human connection. If your life is in crisis, with your job, mental health, family, you're not going to prioritize dating. You're not going to make time to bang. And like we said before, risk an STD and an accidental child. You're trying to use up what energy you have left just to survive. And although I'm not that far removed from Gen Z, this is still a night and day difference between Gen Z and Zillennials like myself. I don't know if my generation was just horny all the time, but when I was in my late teens and early 20s, it seemed like half our conversations were about sex. So we were going to make time to do it. But again, these were different times. The world is very different than it was just 10 years ago. I couldn't tell you the last time I genuinely had free time and I wasn't using it to stress about the other things that I know I should do. So I think the idea that Gen Z doesn't have time to have sex is a pretty valid point. Now, before we get into the final reason y'all gave for why you don't have sex, I have an honorable mention. A surprising number of you mentioned that you just think sex is gross. Whether that's because you don't believe in sex before marriage, you're asexual, or you just have no desire to do it. But my favorite reason by far is this one. This guy says, sex is temporary, Halo is infinite, which is hilarious. Alright, so back to the fifth and final reason, and I think this one really sums up how a lot of you guys felt in the comments. The state of the world. It's no secret that a lot of us are in uncomfortable situations right now. Take this comment for example. He says, "We're not afraid of sex itself, we're afraid of the consequences, pregnancy, STDs, false accusations, and everything in between. People in this generation are dating and having sex, but a significant number are less willing to take risks. On top of that, as countless discussions have shown online, dating has become a nightmare in today's climate, complicated by social, cultural, and economic pressures. Many of us feel stuck in survival mode, and as with any species under high stress, the more we're consumed by risk and uncertainty, the less likely we are to focus on mating." Now, although I don't really think false accusations should be one of your main reasons for not having sex because of how unlikely it is, I do agree with the other points. Economic instability, political chaos, social media keeping us from connecting in meaningful ways. Gen Z has their hands full with everything but each other. The sex recession I referred to in my last video is a symptom and a reflection of our current society. When people are uncertain about the future, they pull back from creating life and building relationships to focus on their own survival. Just think about the amount of times you've heard someone say, "Why would I want to bring a kid into this world?" I have personally seen that a million times online, and I think it's very telling for where we are as a society. So there we have it, 5 points from the mouths of Gen Zers for why they don't have sex. And outside of everything that I highlighted in this video, there were a ton of you that shared your personal struggles, from trauma to sexual orientation to personal beliefs. This is something people clearly feel very passionately about, so all insights are welcome. I'm truly blown away by how many people watched that video and how many of you subscribed, so obviously I greatly appreciate that. And if you haven't subscribed, I make videos like this that try to make sense of the world while keeping you informed. And I try to do that without too much doom and gloom. So if you're into that, definitely hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for watching. Shogun!